Good evening. I'd like to call the Budget Committee of the Whole meeting of January 27, 2025 to order. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway-Wendarong, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Seeing none, can I have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that the January 27th, 2025 Budget Committee of the Whole agenda be approved. All in favor? That's carried. The Town's Director of Finance, Treasurer Tony Delmonico will now present the 2025 budget. Questions can be asked once the consolidated budget report is on the floor for discussion. Tony, please come to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to be here tonight to present the 2025 budget on behalf of the corporate leadership team. So here's a summary of what I'll be going over tonight. So the purpose of any municipal budget is to advance council's priorities, so I'd like to start there. Next slide. In 2023, you as a council set a vision and strategic priorities plan for the future, and your vision for Grimsby is to be an innovative, vibrant community where people and the environment matter. Next slide. That vision was broken down into 3 key priorities of people, places, and prosperity. And staff compiled the 2025 budget with these priorities in mind. Strategic plans can't be accomplished overnight, but progress can be made one budget at a time. Next slide. So I'd like to take a bit of time to provide a high-level overview of what makes up the budget. And first, I'd just like to go over the timelines we set earlier. So with respect to the budget timelines, at the September 23rd council meeting, council approved the timelines and planning report with the aim of advancing the budget approval by 1 month compared to the previous year. And shown here on this slide is a summary of those timelines that were presented. In addition to these dates, we came before council in November with a preliminary 2025 budget projects list for information. We released the consolidated operating and capital budget as shown in Appendix D in early January, along with a press release to advise the public and make them aware of how they could register as a delegation. And we also provided council with the option to meet one-on-one with staff to review any aspects of the budget. And we're now here before you for budget deliberations. So municipal budgets are made up of 2 key parts, the operating budget and the capital budget. The operating budget provides for the annual costs to deliver ongoing programs and services, and it covers the calendar year from January to December. The net budget expenses are recovered from the tax levy or water wastewater rates as appropriate. The capital budget relates to time-limited projects with beginning and ends, things like rehabilitation and replacement of existing assets, as well as plans for any new infrastructure. After completion of the project, we have a new or renewed asset, and those projects typically span multiple years. Capital projects are funded from our reserves, so any changes to the project budgets will not have an impact on the tax increase that is proposed in the operating budget. And here at the town, we have a class of projects that we refer to as operating projects. These are like capital projects in that they are time limited and may span over more than 1 year, but they don't result in a capital asset. So examples would include development charge studies, master plans, or building condition assessments as examples. An important thing to note is that operating projects are funded from reserves, and like capital projects, modifications to them do not directly impact the tax levy or wastewater rates. So we've established that capital and operating projects are funded from reserves, but how are the reserves funded? Well, they're funded from operating budget contributions that make up part of the tax levy and water wastewater rates. And we have different types of reserves that serve different purposes. We have asset management reserves that are used to fund capital needs related to asset rehabilitation and replacement. These are funded from budgeted contributions from the tax levy, budgeted contributions from the water wastewater rates, as well as senior government funding via grants. We also have stabilization and contingency reserves used to fund one-time or unexpected costs that have not been budgeted for. These have no dedicated funding and are replenished from operating surpluses that may exist at year-end. Many operating projects are also funded from the stabilization reserve. We also have many special purpose or dedicated reserves, such as development charge reserves to fund growth-related infrastructure. Another example of a special purpose reserve would be the elections reserve, which is used to fund expenses related to town elections. And those funding sources can vary depending on the type of reserve. Next slide. So I'd now like to go over some key considerations and financial pressures that form this year's budget. Move ahead. So the budget's a balancing act, and inherent in the annual operating budget process are the pressures of inflation, growth, as well as infrastructure renewal costs. Staff have prepared the 2025 budget using a holistic approach, taking into account these budget pressures while aligning to the town's long-term financial plans and policies. Budgets were reviewed and adjustments made based on departmental need, as opposed to applying a general inflationary increase. We considered past year's actual trends, and as a result, some departments may have seen more of an increase relative to others. And the budget was drafted with an aim to maintain services, minimize financial pressures, and still deliver an affordable budget. Now, this slide provides an overview of some of the key factors that shaped the budget. The town has certain existing and pending debt obligations related to the hospital and Peach King Center, and this budget ensures we have enough allocated to meet those obligations. Federal and provincial funding is a constant risk. Funding levels are not guaranteed and subject to change. And for 2025, we have seen reductions in grant funding that we'll be receiving. We'll be receiving about $250,000 less than last year, which mainly impacts contributions to asset management reserves. Speaking of which, the town has asset management plans that have identified a gap in available funding versus required funding, and provisions have been made as part of this budget to start closing that gap. Here at the town, we're a Schedule II WSIB employer, meaning that we self-fund claims as they arise. We currently don't have a budget set aside to meet these potential obligations, and decided against including a provision this year just to keep the ask at a reasonable level. However, establishing a sufficient budget to fund these costs will continue to be a pressure for future budgets. Next slide. Our people are an essential component in achieving our strategic and corporate priorities. Through our people strategy, the town continues to invest in people to meet our human capital needs and serving the community. We have 4 main focus areas as shown here on the slide. And investing in our staff is critical and simply good business. Attracting and retaining skilled and talented staff continues to be a focus, as well as a budget pressure in a competitive labor market. Next slide. So I'd like to get into the details now. But first, one more background slide to help illustrate how taxes are calculated. So what happens is we take our total estimated expenses, less our estimated non-tax revenues, such as user fees, grants, investment income, for example. And that equals the property taxes that the town needs to collect for the year. In our case, that amount equals just over $19 million for 2025. The tax levy is then divided by the town's total assessment value to arrive at the tax rate. And finally, the tax rate is then multiplied by each property's assessed value to arrive at the property tax bill. Next slide. So this is where we landed. The town's proposed 2025 tax levy increase is 6.44%. That's an increase of $91 or $7.58 a month for the average assessed property. To help mitigate some of the budget pressures identified earlier, we've been able to offset some of those impacts with increases to revenues in the areas of user fees. We've also re-examined our investment income and we're able to add $200,000 to the investment income budget to help offset the increase. And we're also looking into sponsorship options related to the PKC, and we've added $75,000 in revenues related to that, prorated for 2025. Next slide. Here's a summary of the overall tax impact. You see the town's share of the 6.44% by the green arrow on the bottom right. And the overall property tax increase becomes 7.66 or $439 once the region and education impacts are factored in, along with the share of the wastewater costs that are recovered from the levy. The biggest driver of the overall increase is the region's tax increase of 9.6%. Next slide. Property taxes are a combination of levies imposed by 3 different jurisdictions: the region, the town, and the province for education taxes. The town bills for and collects property taxes on behalf of all 3 jurisdictions. We, of course, don't control the region or educational share because they pass their own budgets. The taxes paid by residents and businesses are not levied equally. As you can see, region taxes account for almost 60% of the town's overall property tax bill. Education taxes account for another 10%, and so that leaves about 30% of the town's property tax share, which actually shrinks down to 25% if you remove the wastewater portion of costs that are on the tax bill. Next slide. This slide provides an example of how those weights factor into taxes levied. Think back to when you were in school. Your final exams carried a larger weight than your in-year tests and quizzes. So what happens on the final exam has more impact. How you do on the quizzes, not so much. Earlier, we mentioned that the overall combined tax increase is 7.6%. In our case, the region carries the biggest weight. Of the 7.6% overall increase in taxes, 5.9 of that is attributable to the region, and only 1.7 of that is attributable to our town taxes. To look at it another way, even if the town were to come in with a 0% tax increase, Grimsby property owners would still see a tax increase of 5.9% because of the region's approved budget and how much weight that carries. Next slide. This slide provides a breakdown of what's making up the town's 6.44% increase. Earlier, I talked about our people strategy and the importance of investing in our people. The town has workplace agreements in place that call for inflationary increase to staff salaries and wages. And added to that are benefit costs such as OMERS, CPP, and health benefits. Together, that makes up 4% of the increase. 0.85% of the increase relates to funds set aside to meet our existing and projected debt payments related to the hospital and Peach King Center. $30,000 for the hospital and $120,000 for the PKC. We're also estimating we'll need to budget for another $120,000 next year to top up the expected PKC debt payments as well. Assessment growth has come in low this year at only 0.6%. We've normally seen that in the 1 to 1.5% range in recent years. And assessment growth has the effect of spreading taxes owing among more properties. So the fact that we came in low this year is really hurting us. Inflationary pressures and budget right sizing is contributing another 1%. Things like utility costs for facilities, materials expenses, and contracted service requirements. And some of these costs are being offset by increases in revenues for things like user fees. We've increased our budgeted revenues for investment income. That's reducing the levy impact by 1%. The total investment income budget is now set at $1 million, and we feel that's a good long-term sustainable level for what we can earn on our portfolio. 2.2% of the increase relates to budget enhancements. Of that, 1% relates to increased contributions to asset management reserves, 0.9% relates to new staff, 0.3% for heritage property tax relief, and I'll go over these more in upcoming slides. Next slide. So I mentioned that 0.9% of the increase relates to budget enhancements for some staff positions, and those are summarized here. The first one you'll see there is the Water Wastewater Services Operator in Training. This is a request for a new full-time position that would serve both the water and wastewater portfolio, the cost of which is $77,500 inclusive of benefits, and the cost would be split between the water wastewater rates, so no tax levy impact. The position is recommended to address succession planning needs because we have many staff in the water wastewater area that are eligible for retirement within the next 5 years. And there is a need to bring on staff now to learn and train on systems so they gain familiarity and have an opportunity for knowledge transfer. We're also planning to add another FTE next year as part of the 2026 budget for the same reason. And there will be an opportunity to reduce the complement down the road once those retirements do take place. The next position you see there is the building permit technician. We're recommending to convert this position from a temporary full-time to a permanent full-time position at no levy impact, since the building department is a self-funded area with costs that are offset by their own revenues. This is a customer-focused position to aid in efficient processing of building permit applications, and it would help better support the day-to-day operations of the building department and free up capacity of their other staff. It would also help to ensure we can meet provincially regulated timeframes for dealing with building permit applications. The next position there is the Community Services Facility and Permits Coordinator. This is a new full-time position, $83,000 impact on the levy, inclusive of benefits. Community Services oversees rental agreements related to multiple facilities, both indoor and out, the demands of which have been increasing. And currently this work is carried out by several part-time customer service staff, the administrative assistant, and recreation supervisors in addition to their primary duties. We're finding that the demands exceed the staff capacity that we have, and the overall facilities rental program requires a dedicated resource to oversee this work. The position would also support another identified need, that being reception and customer service at the expanded Peach King Center when that opens. The Parks and Facilities Operator, this is a new full-time position, $85,000 impact on the levy inclusive of benefits. And it would ensure that parks and facilities are receiving their appropriate levels of service. This is another area that's been functioning with inadequate resources, and the staff shortage is resulting in neglected preventative maintenance, with the impact being that staff only have the capacity to react to urgent issues as they come up rather than proactively managing service levels. So that's not only affecting the public's enjoyment of the amenities, but also raises the risk and potential liability related to town-owned assets. And this position, like the other position, would also support the operations of the expanded Peach King Center, helping to alleviate those needs as well. The last item you'll see on the slide here is the Heritage Tax Relief Program. Now, there's no staffing impacts related to this, but there is a $50,000 impact on the levy. And this is being proposed in response to a council notice of motion that would offer designated heritage property owners with a tax relief program. Further analysis would be required to consider the variable program options, but knowing how much tax relief is available and approved will help guide that. So it's expected that further analysis would be conducted in the first half of the year, with intake from property owners occurring in the second half of 2025. And the benefits of this program include enabling maintenance of heritage properties that can cost more than traditional properties to repair. And this will also encourage heritage designations to help maintain the unique character of the town for future generations. Next slide. So I'd like to shift gears a bit and talk about the projects. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, in addition to our operating budget, which funds ongoing expenses that occur Each year, we have time-limited projects. We break these out into two types, operating projects and capital projects. So this slide summarizes the operating projects. Starting on page 134 of the budget book, Appendix D, you'll see that the individual summaries are contained for each operating project. Now, these projects are one-time or cyclical in nature, do not occur every year, and generally do not result in a capital asset. They are directly connected to council's priorities or possibly legislatively required in some cases, and some are carried forward from prior years and some are new. Because these projects are time limited, they are funded from reserves, not the operating budget. So changes to these projects will not have an impact on the proposed property tax or rate increases. With 22 new operating projects identified, these initiatives form a significant and integral part of moving the town forward. They include initiatives like the zoning bylaw review, community services facilities utilization strategy, storm sewer asset condition survey, and development charge background study, just to name a few. Next slide. The 2025 capital program is a significant investment for the town at $22 million. Similar to operating projects, there are carry forward and new initiatives included, and these projects are funded from reserves, development charges, or grants. So again, any modifications that are made to their budgets will not impact the proposed 2025 tax levy and rate increases. With 62 new projects budgeted for, we have some great asset renewal and growth infrastructure works planned. The biggest one is the downtown water main and complete streets project at $8.5 million. Other projects include neighborhood park renewals at Morocco, Dorchester, and Lakewood Parks, fleet and large equipment replacements, investment in LED lighting across various facilities, continued investment in technology, and more. A full listing and individual project summaries have been included beginning on page 155 of the budget book, Appendix D. A 9-year capital forecast has also been included as part of the 2025 budget. This forecast is included for information only. Actual timing may change and approvals will be required to be brought forward before council each year. As you can see, some substantial projects are planned for 2026 and 2027. For 2026, some notable projects include road reconstruction on North Service Road, storm sewer improvements on Casablanca Boulevard, Whitaker Park renewal, and Pump House shoreline improvements. And for 2027, some large dollar projects relate to a new Fire Station 3, as well as water main and wastewater rehabilitation work in drainage areas 5 and 7. Next slide. While there are many indicators of financial health, reserve strategy and balances are a key way in which municipalities can show they are investing in future and supporting timely renewal and rehabilitation of vital assets. To council's credit, when operating surpluses have existed, they've been invested in our reserves to improve our financial health. However, our reserve balances have been trending down lately. Next slide. Budgeted reserve contributions make up about 7 cents out of every dollar in our operating budget. Reserve contributions are akin to municipal savings or money in the bank. Each year, we draw on our reserves to fund our capital program for required asset rehab and replacement. Drawing on these reserves to fund capital works helps us keep our debt under control. The primary source of funding for our reserves is the tax levy, along with some federal and provincial funding. And based on the number and value of assets we have, we estimate the share of funding that is put towards reserves annually should be more in the 20 to 30% range to be sustainable long-term. Next slide. In response to provincial requirements, municipalities across Ontario have undertaken asset management plans and studies, and the results have all been consistent. Studies have shown that there's a gap between the capital needs and funding. As a result, municipalities across the province are putting financial plans in place to begin to address these gaps. The town studies project a $5 million annual deficit for our asset management needs versus our dollars available. And there's also a backlog of assets to be replaced. So the gap will only continue to get larger if we don't start to address it. We need to slowly set aside more funds to be contributed to reserves to grow them into adequate and reliable sources of funding for capital asset replacement and rehabilitation. So what you see on the slide before you there, the blue bars represents our capital budget expenditures per our 10-year capital plan. And the solid yellow line represents our asset management reserve balances, which are projected to dip into negative territory in 2030. You also see two dotted lines on the slide. The brownish red one on the top represents our estimated level of sustainable reserve funding that we need to get to. We estimate that to currently be 11 million. It's projected to increase because of inflation. The green dotted line represents our level of reserve contributions, currently 5 million. So we need to start increasing our reserve contributions so we can start to close that funding gap. Now you might be wondering, why is the brown dotted line so much higher than our 10-year capital forecast? So the reason for that is because many of our assets are still young and in good condition, and over time our capital needs will grow, and we'll need to fund more and more to renew and replace our assets as they age. Next slide. So I hope this provides some perspective on the town's capital assets and what that translates to on a per household basis. So here at the town, we have between $500 and $600 million worth of assets. That excludes the water, wastewater assets. And that works out to about $38,000 worth of assets per household. Our current annual contributions are just over $5 million, which is about $350 per household. The proposed asset management contribution increase this year is $178,000, which would be $12.40 additional per household. And as mentioned, the estimated annual need to be sustainable is about $11 million, which would work out to about $625 per household. Next slide. As can be seen, reserve contributions have not materially increased over recent years. The green represents contributions we levy for, and the blue represents outside funding from senior government grants. We're recommending we budget for and contribute an additional $178,000 to reserves in 2025, 1% of the proposed levy increase. If we can stick to regular dedicated increases of between 1% and 2%, we'll be able to grow those reserve contributions to $9 million annually by 2034, as shown on the slide. By investing in our reserves via regular, dedicated savings, we'll reduce our need for debt and the interest costs that come with it. And we shouldn't view this as an expense, but rather as an investment. Our federal and provincial funding support is lacking and needs to increase. We have limited revenue sources. We don't have access to sales taxes or income taxes like senior levels of government do. So certainly more advocacy is needed and more support from higher levels of government in this area is needed. Next slide. So I'd like to turn to our water and wastewater rates now. Next slide. Our water and wastewater bills are made up of treatment and distribution costs, and the region is responsible for treatment and supply, and the town is responsible for distribution and collection. The bills customers receive from the town include the cost of both the treatment and distribution costs. Overall, we have a 12.8% increase on the average water wastewater bill. The water fixed rate is increasing by 3%, and the variable rate has a modest increase of 3 cents to $1.57 per cubic meter. However, the wastewater system costs are seeing larger increases, which I'll get to in a second. And the net impact on the average household is estimated to be $114 in their water wastewater bill for the year. Next slide. The pie graph on the left provides a visual of where water rates go. It costs a total of $8.4 million to operate the water system, split relatively evenly between the town's costs, the town's contributions to water reserves, and our share of the region's costs for treatment. We're seeing a $340,000 increase in 2025, relatively evenly distributed. Next slide. Here's a breakdown of our wastewater system costs, $9.8 million in operating costs, and the pie graph on the right shows an increase of $2.3 million in 2025 and provides a breakdown of what's driving that increase. So you can see 90% is attributable to regional cost increases, and there are three main factors that are driving that. One is that regional wastewater costs are increasing due to their future infrastructure needs. The region's treatment costs were $100 million last year, and that's up to $116 million this year, or a 16% increase due to their catching up on their asset management needs. The region bills all local area municipalities for costs of treating wastewater based on a 3-year rolling average, meaning that average flows over the last 3 years are used to calculate each municipality's share of the region's budgeted wastewater costs. The region recently notified us of an error in their meter reading calibration, and this error resulted in our past average flows being recorded lower than what was actually the case. So in essence, they've been underbilling us the past couple of years. Now that the inputs have been corrected for, this has the effect of suddenly increasing our share of their costs for 2025. Another factor is inflow and infiltration. That may be contributing to the increased flows to the treatment plant as well. And what that is if more stormwater or rainwater infiltrates into the sewer system, perhaps via cracked sewage pipes that are in need of repair or roof leaders that are connected directly to the sewage system, that increases our wastewater treatment flows. And we have a budget included, project, I should say, included in the budget to identify and mitigate problem areas to help rectify this. Next slide. So I'd like to turn now to reviewing our tax and rate competitiveness with our neighbors. This slide is based on 2024 taxes, but you'll see that we are 25% below the regional average, and I expect we will remain well below the average in 2025 based on what we're proposing. Next slide. This is a comparison of the split of the share of property taxes that are paid by residents versus businesses, and helps illustrate the importance of economic development initiatives to attract business and help grow the non-residential tax base. We have about an 85-15% split in Grimsby. As you can see, we're on the low side when it comes to non-residential taxes, shown in orange. The more we can build up this orange bar, not only will the town benefit from more jobs and spin-off business that's created, but we would be lessening the tax burden on residents. Next slide. This slide compares our water rates. Our 2024 and 2025 rates are shown in green compared to the other Niagara Region municipalities' 2024 rates shown in blue. We're at about the regional average and will likely end up below the average once the others pass their own rates. Next slide. As for wastewater, despite the jump we're experiencing this year in our regional cost allocation, our wastewater rates are still below the average compared to our neighboring Niagara municipalities. Next slide. And finally, this slide helps provide some perspective on overall taxes and rates paid. Grimsby has the lowest combined taxes and wastewater rates in relation to household income in the region. Next slide. So to conclude, I want to thank Council for the opportunity to present this budget today. The corporate leadership team feels we have before you a fiscally responsible budget that supports a healthy community, fosters responsible growth, and promotes collective prosperity. Before I end, I do want to give a big thank you to the corporate leadership team and to my finance team that worked tirelessly behind the scenes to bring this budget to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Tony, and again, thank you to staff and the corporate leadership team for bringing forward a very positive budget and really happy with the work that you've done to get it to this point. Can I have a mover and seconder to receive the presentation? Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that the 2025 budget presentation from the treasurer be received. All in favor? That's carried. All right, I would like to put forward that we split the question and have council vote on each recommendation in the budget report separately before we get to deliberations. Can I have a mover and seconder for that? Councillor Vardy, Councillor Korstanji. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that report FIN 2510, 2025 Consolidated Budget Report dated January 27, 2025 be received. All in favor? That's carried. Can I have a mover and seconder get recommendation number 2 being the Community Development Grant Program on the floor for discussions? Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Davoli. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that the 2025 Community Development Grant Program in the amount of $100,000 be approved and funded from the 2024 year-end surplus if available. All in favor?
Can we get a recorded vote on each of these, Mayor, please?
Sure. Yep, we can vote via e-scribe. Councillor Frank, you have a question?
No, I was voting.
Councillor Frank, are you a yes or no for this question?
I'm a yes on that.
Thank you.
If I can ask just a clarification, as it comes up on the screen, it doesn't refer to number 2. Since we're going through it, if we can just ensure that the one that we've got up on our e-scribe, that's for line number 2, correct? Or recommendation number 2?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And that's carried. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 3, being the 4 permanent full-time positions on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor Vardy, seconded by Councillor Sharwa. Any questions or comments? Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor, thank you. I'm just wondering if we could amend the one for the Parks and Facilities Operator to a part-time position, cut that down 50%. So that'd be $42,565. Reason being that we have Brock University right nearby, and these are positions that students typically try to get to bulk up their resume. So rather than hire a full-time, hoping we can make this a part-time position.
All right, so you're welcome to put forward an amendment, get a seconder, and we'll vote on that.
Thank you. That's what I'd like to do. Yes, thank you. I'm looking to bring the Parks and Facilities Operator position that's currently suggested to be a full-time position, $85,129, to being a part-time position, $42,565.
All right, we just need a seconder for that resolution. It's an amendment. So we have Councillor Charwal as the mover. We need a seconder. And then we need to vote on the amendment. All right, if I see no seconder, so that fails. Yeah, we're back to the original motion. Discussion on the original motion. Councillor DeVoli.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I would like to share some thoughts, I guess, on the budget and how it pertains to our resolution on our full-time staff. And what I see in this budget is a town that is wrestling with change. Assessment growth just under 1%, more households coming in, more of us getting older and our needs changing, more of us trying to get on board digitally, more of us coming from larger communities, and more of our staff getting older, and we need to worry about succession planning in all of this too. And so when I see these 4 positions here in front of us, I see them specifically responding to those challenges. I see with the position for the wastewater operator, being proactive and responding to succession planning and being concerned about that. I see us with the building position, dealing with more households, more building permits, more development still to come in the next year and going forward. And truly helping the economy, because full-time employees rather than contract employees finally have a chance to meet those criteria at the bank when they too want to go and buy a house and qualify for mortgages and so on. And so really helping that next generation in many ways too when we convert these positions over. And then I see those 2 positions in community services, the one, as our treasurer mentioned, where we need to be more proactive and make sure that these aging assets are kept in really good shape proactively. And unfortunately, I think we have tried to do it on a shoestring. We've tried to do it with part-time staff. We've tried to do it with, I'll say, university/college students. And the needs and the experience and skill set required, demands of us a full-time, more experienced person in those positions. And then the last position, which although it seems that it deals with scheduling and so on, and not totally because of the Peach King Center, just, something that seems to be on the plate of every person in our Parks and Rec department, but now will become more centralized, I think goes a long ways to helping raise revenues as well. I've heard some councillors around this table talk about empty ice time and not being fully utilized and so on. And I think whenever you have a full-time employee assigned to that who takes it on as their responsibility, that it can go a long ways towards meeting those needs. The Peach King Center is a factor in all this, for sure. I don't think it's the biggest factor, but certainly a factor. And although we didn't specifically think that we were going to require staff, I would be naive if I said I didn't know it was coming. We're not ostriches. We knew when we were proposing to build that building there that it was something new. It was an additional building. We knew it was going to take more programming, more cleaning, more everything just to make it a go because it's new. And in addition to something, it's not just a replacement of an existing asset. So I would like to think that I'm not an ostrich, that I'm not naive, and although we didn't really have a specific dollar value, and I'll share a tidbit that Finance Committee is recommending that going forward from our minutes, you'll see it at the next meeting, that there always be an operational analysis related to every new capital ask. But we knew it was coming. And so I can honestly say that our staff have really tried. They had many more new positions that they wanted. They managed to whittle it down to the 4 most important ones, and I support them on this.
Thank you, Councillor DeVoli. I just want to add a little bit on that. council, in our priorities, we approved a $36 million facility. And I would hate to see that being understaffed, rec services under pressure to optimize rentals in this facility, optimize efficient use of this facility. We've already been told that our parks and recs are operating on a catch-up basis. With coordinators, we can make this run much more efficient, and we can fill this $36 million facility with the programs that our residents want. Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple of concerns that I have about the new positions. I recognize with the wastewater and water position that it's indicated as no levy impact, but it does mean a $77,000 increase to split between the wastewater and water bills. As far as the facilities and permits coordinator are concerned, and the parks and facilities operator are concerned, my understanding is that the Peach King Center won't be open for the majority of 2025 unless there's an update on the timeline. So I would recommend and I would suggest that it's premature to hire staff for a facility where we don't know what our needs will be. So I'm going to make a motion that we postpone these hirings till 2026 because I don't think that I don't think that they make sense in 2025. And further to that, you know,
Is that a deferral motion?
It is a motion.
Well, then you can't speak any further on it.
Okay.
All right, I'll call the vote on a deferral motion. Use your e-scribe. Deferral motions are non-debatable.
No, clarity. I just don't know when we're deferring.
Yeah, Councillor DeFlavio, when would you like to defer this to?
2026, to the 2026 budget. So this is the 2025 budget
Which position?
for both of the recreation positions.
Councillor Bradsy's seconder. That's the two recreation staff positions. Councillor Frake?
No.
And that's defeated. All right, we're back to the original motion now. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. So looking back at previous budgets, which were all posted on the Town of Grimsby website, I'm going to just do the last 3 years. We have 6 new staff in 2023, 2 new staff in 2024, and 4 new full-time staff this year. So that would make a total of 12 staff. That indicates a 10% staffing increase over the last 3 years, according to the numbers that are on the town website. So a 10% staffing increase. Looking at the assessment growth over those 3 years, that's about double what the population has grown. I'm just using the numbers from the budgets again. So there seems to be a disconnect between what we're doing as a council. I'll keep it to that, and I'll save my other comments for the final speaking. That's just regarding the new staffing. So I will be voting against the entirety of the new staffing because we haven't been given a chance to defer some of it.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just sort of 2 points. One, a point of clarification. A lot of that staffing has taken temporary people that were being paid for anyway and making them full-time. So there was not necessarily an increase in bodies, just taking them from temporary to permanent. The other thing is, if you do a kind of retrospective, and I'd say going back to the term before my first term, so going back 6 years, and if you look sort of retrospectively, there wasn't a lot of hiring of new people, and comparatively, the town was really understaffed. Because those increments were never made. And I assume it was done to keep taxes down. Okay, I applaud it, but at the same time, there's growth. And if you want your services to function, you need the people to do it. So I think there's two things. Like I said, the first point, a lot of that was just conversion. And two, we're playing catch up. So if you compare our staffing to other towns our size within this region, you'll find that we are quite, was it last year, for instance, we hired a communications person. I think Lincoln has 3 communications people. So, you know, I think we just got to be very careful when you say, well, we've hired, 10% more. We've been really understaffed in a lot of functional areas and areas that serve the public. So, I support the staffing that we've done so far.
Councillor DeVoley.
Mayor Jordan, might I suggest, given that we have these 4 positions in front of us, and that we ask the department heads who are asking for these positions if they would take a couple minutes each, Public Works and then Community Services. I don't know who might be here to represent the building position, or if our town manager can just speak to it. But if they could just share with us, their analysis and why they feel these positions are really important and the problems that they will solve by having them.
Sarah, why don't you go first?
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I'll try to keep it fairly brief, as I know there's others that will want to give some comments as well. But I think, as was echoed earlier, our community really is growing, and we're seeing increasing pressures in all of our areas, certainly in our parks, our facilities, and also our services. And I thought I would just give 2 examples, one very high level and one maybe very close to the ground. A few of our staff collaborated today, and the average construction value in building permits over the past 6 years has been $98 million per year, which really speaks to the growth in the community. On a very smaller level, our summer children's programming alone has increased to 3,100 spots, which is a 35% increase in 3 years, which is huge for us, and quite honestly would be even greater if we weren't under construction with the Peach King Center. So a very high, very low level example to give, but I think it just speaks to overall there is a lot of change happening. There is a lot of growth happening, and certainly we're seeing it in our area. Casablanca Park alone has been an incredible success story, but also a challenge for us. The number of people visiting that park is certainly exceeding what we were expecting, and the demands on staff to keep it looking the way that we want Grimsby to be represented is a challenge, certainly with the current staff that we have. We have 10 operators who work for our parks and facilities, which are the staff that are mainly doing some of these day-to-day tasks. And just for example as well, the Peach King Center, when it's operating, runs from 6 a.m. to 11 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. So on a single day, that actually requires 4 of our full-time staff to satisfy that day. So it's 4 different staff, 2 morning shifts and 2 afternoon shifts to cover that facility. So quickly you start to see those numbers of staff dwindle down. We have over 50 parks that we are providing services to, 30 that have playgrounds. We also manage all of the facilities, over 10 of them, including some complex facilities, such as the Peach King Center, this building, fire stations, the library. We service all of those facilities as well. And that could be from addressing minor maintenance concerns, to addressing some troubleshooting items, to setting up for an event, and in some cases also cleaning our facilities as well. The list really does go on, and I think it's just the demands on the team to provide those services is not being met with the current resources we have. We do use part-time where we can, particularly in certain seasons, but we really need staff to have certain levels of training in some of this work as well and have that ongoing presence from them. In terms of the facility scheduler, one of the challenges as well for that is, we want to make sure we are maximizing our revenue potential and also maximizing that use. And the day-to-day rentals is one thing handled by the sides of desk of many of our part-time staff, but having that really focused look on making sure we're being proactive and looking at it far in advance to make sure we're really maximizing the use of those facilities. As was said earlier, $36 million investment in the Peach King Center. We really want to make sure we're maximizing how we're using that time with our residents, and then there is the revenue component to that as well. I hope that helps a little bit.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Ms. Sweeney. So
Yeah.
the proposed timeline for opening the Peach King Center, what is the timeline? And how does the staff hiring relate to the timeline?
Through the mayor. So we are still targeting for before the end of the year to be open. Certainly the ice will still open in September as well. So that is a factor in terms of how we will operate the facility. But one thing I do want to stress as well, especially with the facility scheduler, you don't schedule the facility when it opens. You schedule it months and months in advance of that so that the day it opens is booming with activity. It's transitioning our LAC programs over and doing all of that work well in advance, months in advance. Working with our basketball association, all those groups, we're literally trying to start those conversations as much as we can right now because they're going to plan ahead for that as well as part of their registration. So some of that work does need to be done in advance. As far as the operator position, while that certainly contributes towards operating the Peach King Center, it isn't only that. It is the pressures that we've had for many, many years.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. So Mr. Delmonico mentioned being proactive rather than reactive. I was wondering if you could provide some examples of where we've been reactive over the last couple of years, and how these new positions will help us to eliminate that reactive approach. So, this is where we've had to be reactive rather than proactive, and this is how this is going to help correct that, how these new staff positions will help fix that problem.
Sure, through the mayor. So a couple of examples would be, again, the scheduling. So the more that we're ahead of it and trying to maximize those time windows well in advance and filling that schedule. I'll give ice as an example. Last minute ice is harder to sell because most people aren't going to book the ice last minute. Some will, but most are doing it well in advance. So making sure we're really looking at those windows and how are we building the schedule to maximize those opportunities well in advance. Certainly for our parks and facilities, I think the biggest thing is maintenance and the condition of our facilities. Our staff sometimes are running from problem to problem in a day, and they are not getting to the preventative maintenance that they need to. So things such as some of our sports fields, some of that maintenance, other things that they should be doing proactively for the facility to keep it in the condition it needs to be. If they can't get to the task, they're doing the task on fire, if I can say it that way, and they're not getting to those other pieces.
Councillor Sharwell.
Through Mayor, I'm just I'm not sure if we have a consensus on the majority of these hires. If there's a chance that we could possibly break them up, if that's possible, into 4. I just, I think some of we probably have a consensus on the majority of them, but I know for me, the one is the facilities operator I'm not sure of. And I don't want to negate from the other rec.
I'm quite happy to vote on them separately.
Thank you.
I think Brandon. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to keep my comments at a high level, but if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So just walk you through a bit of the legislative framework. So water and wastewater systems are governed by provincial legislation, the Safe Drinking Water Act for water and the Ontario Water Resources Act for wastewater. Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, or the MECP, has oversight responsibility of both of those regulations or acts. Per our regulations, our water and wastewater systems need to be under the care of licensed personnel. The town currently has 8 licensed water operators who look after our systems, and this includes our supervisor. So as part of the 2025 budget, staff are proposing to add an additional position to our complement. Essentially, we're recommending we create a new roster spot for a training position. Staff feel that this position is needed for succession planning, as Mr. Delmonico had mentioned, due to impending retirements. So as of 2024, we had collectively 135 years of total experience on our roster between the 8 staff. We expect to lose 130 of that 135 years in the next 4 to 6 years. 6 of our 8 operators are expected to retire, and we have 1 who has retired last year as well. So, number does not include losing staff from other purposes, resignations, health matters, et cetera, the life happenings kind of situations. We presently have 2 vacancies and been actively recruiting to fill them. We're having difficulty finding qualified candidates who hold full water and wastewater licenses. So we need to keep our existing positions open for those licensed water operators, but the new roster spot does allow us to bring in a trainee to work alongside those licensed operators. Idea being we can use the next 4 to 6 years to train them and build their competency to a point where they're able to take over the other operators who will be retiring. So again, I'm happy to answer questions, but just to close out on my thoughts, I guess, safety of our drinking water is imperative. We have stringent rules to follow with respect to training and licensing. It's critical for us to have competent personnel managing our systems. And with impending retirements on the horizon, we're concerned with what our future state will look like. And we believe creating a space on our roster for a training position is a prudent approach of getting ahead of that impending retirements.
Thank you, Brandon. Councillor DeVoley.
Thank you. I wanted to share with everyone that at the Public Works Committee, I'm going to say in the last 6 months, we've probably had this discussion twice already when we've had the water quality reports come to us and talked about this and how absolutely vital it is that the water we're all drinking meets standards. And I don't even need to say the word Walkerton before everybody wakes up. And more importantly, what I understand from the courses we have had to take is that each of us as counselors are personally liable. And so when our staff tell us that we need qualified staff and that the best way to get it is through this apprenticeship, what I'll call like an apprenticeship program, my understanding is that they've already tried just about everything that they can possibly think of. We've seen it in more than that department. We've seen it where we go out, we have an opening, we raid staff from another municipality. Then that municipality has a gap, and then they advertise and raid staff from another municipality. And we start this domino effect, which doesn't help anybody in the end because all we do is raise the cost of these staff members as well, and we lose the experience that as it moves around too. And every time you bring someone in new, we have to educate them on our municipality and how we do things too. So this position and this unique way of being proactive to actually solve it, I think is one of those times where we're illustrating that we can think outside of the box on this, that we're not just going to do it the same old. We're actually going to find a new way and call it a pilot project if you want for the next year to see if we can find someone along those lines, and if it can possibly work for us, maybe we'll try it again and again after that. But when I see liability facing me right in the face as as a municipal councillor with no amount of liability insurance to cover that particular issue. When I see water that we ingest every single day, many times a day, and when I see a new and unique approach coming forward on this, I think those are all good things.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. I'm just going to call the question if possible. Very briefly, or right after you, if we could call the question, that'd be great.
Sure. Harold is online, so he's willing to speak to it. So if I can just get Harold to come on.
Hello?
Good evening, Harold. We can hear you.
Great. To you, Mayor. The building's position is one that directly responds to the development community's desires for a more expedited process, and given that that building's budget, its entire budget is entirely funded through the fees, it's a position that would help to satisfy the desires of a more expedited process, while of course not having an impact on the levy, given that the fees, in fact, it's a funded position through permit fees. So the development community is paying for what it is that it's requesting, and of course having more bodies with respect to buildings also means that we don't have any. We can mitigate impacts, of course, with staff turnaround, and so it's paid for, it's funded, it's not going to impact the levy, and it builds a more robust team to ensure that we don't have any cataclysmic impacts of any significant staff changes, which had happened over the past year.
Thank you very much for those comments, Harold. I don't see any questions from staff, so we'll approve or not approve each of these hires separately. Do we just use the same mover?
We just need a mover and second.
Need a mover and seconder for this resolution. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, seconded by Councillor Sharwa. All right, moved by Councillor Bradzi, seconded by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that the water wastewater services operator and training position be included in the budget. Vote on your e-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
It's a yes for me.
Thank you. That's approved. The second one is moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that the building permit technician position be included in the budget. Vote on your e-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
It's a yes for me.
Thank you. And that's carried. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that the facility and permits coordinator position be included in the budget. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried 7-2. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor Sharwa. Resolved that the park and facilities operator be included in the budget. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried 6-3. Thank you. All right, can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 4, being the Heritage Tax Relief Program, on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Corstangi. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by, discussion, any? Councillor DeFlavio, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. So I'm happy to see that this is on the budget. My question is what the actual impact will be and how it'll be used, how it'll be divided up. So I don't know if Mr. Delmonico can answer that. How will that grant be divvied up?
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
Yeah, through the mayor. Yeah, so we're looking to bring, to look at the different program options and start intake in the second half. But I believe we have Terry Danya Edwards on the line from our planning department that could speak more to that.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. When we actually get the funding for the program, then we will be able to provide a further report looking at all of the options we have. So each, we would look up, the program allows between 10 and 40% for each individual property. So we would have to look at the program. There's a variety of different options that various municipalities use, and it's a program that people have to apply for. So it's not a guarantee that everybody gets it. It's often a time-limited thing. So we would have to detail that in a report when we go forward, and that would be up for council decision and discussion when we get to that point. So we don't have a definitive number about how much that will be for each property at this point in time. It's just once we have the money available, then we can allocate that through the program development.
Thank you, Terry. Councillor DeFlavio, you're okay.
So it's TBT, to be determined, which is fine. Like I said, I've been advocating for heritage, some sort of heritage relief for years now. I'm happy to see it on the budget. I'm concerned this is not going to have a significant impact, but I guess we'll see when it comes through. And is this permanent, I guess, is my question, because it is on the levy. So is this going to be whatever we determine after a report comes forward? Is it going to be permanent? Because Terry mentioned that it's not going to be permanent, but how will we go forward with this on a year-to-year basis? Will people have to consistently reapply for the program? Will it be applied to every heritage home that is granted that request and divided up accordingly?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, those are all the details of the program that we have to look through. Often we continue the program, but which homeowners or property owners get it over time can sometimes change. So they would have to apply for it. And there's lots of municipalities how they do it differently. So those are all the details we're going to have to look at about how long. And those are all the items that we would be able to get feedback from you, what you prefer to see.
Thank you very much, Terry. And given the privately owned heritage assets that we have and the homeowners that have pride in their home, I think I'm just proud of council for finally making this a first step to actually give back to our heritage homeowners that care about their property and really want to see their properties looking great in the town of Grimsby. And everyone who comes through Grimsby, everyone who lives in Grimsby benefits from these heritage homeowners. So seeing the town actually put our money where our mouth is a really good first step. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio. All right, all right, Councillor Stavoli, thank you.
Thank you. And I won't take up space by reiterating everything Mayor Jordan has said. I think that we are committed to supporting this. But the accountant in me, the financial planner in me says we have to put a cap on it as well, that it can't be open-ended and there has to be dollar limits to it because everything is about the yin and the yang. We give something here, then something else doesn't get done. So thank you. I think we need to establish a program like this, but I think we also need to put dollar limits on it, which we have done. So thank you.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, the last thing I was going to say is I hope that you and Councillor Seaborn can advocate for further tax reduction at the regional level for heritage property owners, because our past heritage programs have benefited from regional matching. And as Mr. Delmonico's presentation showed tonight, the majority of the taxes, 2-to-1, are regional to the town of Grimsby. So if we could get a regional matching program in place, it would have a much more significant impact on heritage property owners in Grimsby. So I guess through you and to you, Mayor, if you could go out there and promote heritage at the regional level and try to get them to match this, I think it would have a much more profound impact on heritage in Grimsby. Thank you.
That's certainly something I will champion and do my best to get it at the regional level. Seeing Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I'm happy to see this come forward. I just want to thank the few key residents that have advocated for this, because they've been tireless advocates on behalf of all the heritage owners, and I think that deserves to be recognized as well.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that the Heritage Tax Relief Program of $50,000 with a levy impact of 0.28% as outlined in the report be approved. Vote on your e-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. That's carried. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 5, being the 2025 capital budget, on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Discussion? Seeing none, moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli. Resolved that the 2025 capital budget outlined in Appendix C in the amount of $22,101,050 be approved. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, that's carried. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 6, being the 2025 wastewater gross operating budget, on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor Korstanji. Second, Councillor Howe. Questions? Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. So I think our staff has done an excellent job of explaining why for the increases in the operating budget at the town's level, and most of it is passed down from the regional level, and I get that. I guess through you and to you, Mayor, is the question of why at the regional level, and a better explanation to the taxpayers of this dramatic increase in water and wastewater rates over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm not questioning the legitimacy of it, because clearly it's necessary, because it's budgeted for, but explaining to the taxpayers why would be important. And to put things in context for you, I keep all my bills, okay? I keep my water bills, and I've got a water bill from 2020, and I know that we've moved usage from the levy and wastewater from the levy to the water bill. But my water bill from August 1st to November 30th of 2020 was $288, which is pretty high. It was, we use a lot of water. For a similar amount of water in 2023, it was $569, which is almost double for a 4-month period. That, again, would be fine, because I have no problem with the usage rates for water. It should be based on what people use. But the promise was that when it moved from the levy to the water rates, we would see a decrease on the levy in that.
So this is wastewater, so you're talking about wastewater or water?
Yes.
I'll let you go then.
So because wastewater is on the water rate now, there has been a significant increase. And again, Mr. Delmonico did an excellent job explaining that there's a $2.3 million increase from the region just this year in that, how much we're transferring to them. I think the explanation of why, the miscalculation that you've told us about, Mr. Delmonico, that's a fine superficial explanation. But how that kind of error occurs needs to be explained to the taxpayer. That's not a minor difference. And again, it's not a judgment of our staff. It's just a question about how that kind of error occurs. And if that kind of explanation could be brought from the region or from our staff members to explain to the taxpayers where that $2.3 million error occurred or how that occurred, I think that would make people feel a little bit better in understanding why this change is occurring. That was my only thoughts on that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Sharwell.
Through Mayor, thank you. To you, Tony. Sorry, just with clarification of that. So with the miscalculation, is it the community that's recouping, that's paying for the miscalculation? So somebody that didn't use a lot of water, are they now paying for somebody that does, like a larger family that didn't pay their share? Or are they actually going back to the house that maybe didn't pay enough? This is just a general, just trying to figure out how this works.
No, those are good questions. And yeah, so maybe if I give a bit more background on that. So the way it works, as I mentioned, was that our budget is based on a historical 3-year rolling average of our wastewater flows. And so based on our share of flows versus the other local area municipalities, that's how they divvy up that $116 million piece of the treatment pie. So when those flows were incorrectly recorded lower, our share of the budget in 2023, 2024 was artificially low. So if you look back at the past budgets, we didn't increase the consumption rate. It stayed at 123. Because our share was lower than it should have been. What happens then at year end is there's like a true up that happens, a reconciliation. So the region looks back and says, okay, this is what the actual flows were. This is what we charged you for in the budget. Because that error was identified in 2023, when they looked at the actual flows, they came in much higher than what we had been budgeted for. So that resulted in a $1.7 million reconciliation. So the underpayment has already been paid to the region. No one's going to be billed extra now on their bills because going back like that. No, that's not how it works. That was paid out of our contingency reserve. Then in 2024, for this year end, we just heard from the region that our reconciliation is going to be $1.6 million for the same reason, because even though they discovered the error, they had still budgeted for our flows as if it was using the lower amount. So we have another 1.6 million reconciliation going to be funded from our contingency reserve, and so this is like a budget right sizing, if you will, getting it up to where it should be, and so I hope that answers that part of the question.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. The reality comes down to, we've been told that it was a calibration issue with meters, right? Okay, it would behoove us to ask for an explanation why, and I know how they fail. But secondly, what have they done to correct or remedy that situation from happening again? Because it's kind of a no-brainer, a meter, and they have to get calibrated on a frequent basis, especially at that level. It shouldn't have gone on like that.
Yeah, through the mayor, and my understanding is they have periodic assessments done. They bring in consultants to review the calibration and the reading, and so I think there are some checks there that are in place to prevent it from happening too long, I guess.
Go ahead.
Just as a follow-up, Mayor. Tony, I understand exactly what you're saying, but we need to get some kind of a statement from the region as to what they're going to do going forward to make sure that something this basic is just a meter, and that this is not rocket science, and somewhere along the line, someone should have been catching it long before they did. So, I guess if I can, probably over to Brandon. Brandon, if we bring it up to the next Public Works meeting, and we'll expect an explanation from the region. Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, that's something certainly we can take away. Obviously, when we look at errors on our end, we implement corrective actions, and there's a whole protocol in terms of documenting that corrective actions, what were the causes, that kind of thing. So certainly you can follow up the region, ask for more clarity and something in writing if that makes council feel better. So everything's transparent, and we can bring that back to Public Works Committee for further digestion, I guess.
Councillor DeVoley.
Thank you. I guess my comments are just based upon our Finance Committee meeting where this also came up, and to share with my fellow councillors and the public that this meter, which is at the border of Lincoln and Grimsby, basically measures how much sewage flow is coming into Grimsby to the sewage treatment plant, takes a measurement there, and then by default, the rest is considered to be ours. And so it's important to understand that what we were underbilled, in effect, the town of Lincoln, by and large, was overbilled. So our payment is not now sitting in the bank account of the region of Niagara. It actually then went out in a payment to correct the town of Lincoln's billing in all of this, too. And that's important to understand, that there's a bit of the yin and the yang in all of this. It wasn't just, our loss and the region's gain. It actually was something where the town of Lincoln wastewater users basically overpaid, and now going forward, they get that reflected in their rates. And the other part that I really struggled with is the fact that, this error was made. Certainly, we need to know from them what corrective action they're taking. But at the end of the day, no matter where the error was, whether it was, and it was at the region, but even if the region were made to bear its cost in all of this, that would only get passed back to the rest of us again, because the only pocket that hand is going into is yours and mine. And it's a sad fact, but that's how it works.
All right, seeing no further questions. Councillor Vardy? All right, moved by Councillor Corstangi, second by, who did I have second? Councillor Howe. Resolved that the 2025 wastewater gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $9,830,640 and a net levy of $4,815,040 in the wastewater rates outlined in Appendix B be approved. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Councillor Vardy?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't know if this is too late, but I had sent last week a motion that I wanted to have put forward, and it sort of got lost in the mail. And what it was the $90,000 for public art in the capital budget. And I know we've approved the capital budget, but I wonder if there's some way that we could look at a separate motion to that issue.
Yeah, you can, you're welcome to put forward an amendment to waive the procedural bylaw. If that gets 2/3, you as the mover need a seconder.
May I do that now?
If that gets 2/3, then we can look at it. Yes?
Dawn has a second.
Seconder?
Through you, Chair. Sarah Sweeney can give us a little bit of background and information on that one?
Well, we can't talk about it until the
Then I'll
procedural
second.
gets 2/3. Okay?
Thank you.
So we're doing it on.
Well, I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that the procedural bylaw be waived to permit Councillor Vardy to raise an item regarding public art in the capital budget. A 2/3 resolution is required. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frey.
Yes for me.
Thank you.
So she can bring forward
All right.
the motion.
That's been carried, so you can bring forward your motion now.
Can I speak to it now, the motion? So in reviewing the budget, there was $90,000 in capital expenditures for public art. And two things, I guess. One, I think the timing is wrong when we have, so many pressures that have hit the community. And I get that it doesn't affect the tax levy, but I just don't feel that it's a necessary expenditure at this time. That also, I'd like to say, I understand that an artist from this community has offered to give us, a person who's a large-scale sculptor has offered to give us art, which we turned down. And I'm not sure why that happened, but I would just like to think that we should maybe not think about that this year. And if there is a way to pursue free art from an artist that was born and raised in Grisby, I think that we should be following up on that and looking into that. Thank you.
Sarah, could you come up and speak on that, please? I think it's only fair for you to give background of why it's on our budget.
Thank you, Mayor. So a few years ago, we did approve a public art policy, and some of that plan was to make some investments into public art. So we have put that into our 10-year plan. I understand there are pressures, and certainly it can be something that can be delayed. Another option could be to reduce it. As either way, we would be looking at possible grant fundings or different opportunities to reduce that and do some sharing of that cost. Inevitably, there is always some cost to us, though, when there's an installation. I do have some familiarity with the scenario I think you're speaking of, but I'm not familiar of it being turned down, so happy to have those conversations again. If that were the case, though, again, we may want to still leave some money in the budget to support it, because inevitably preparing the site and doing some of that work would probably be at our cost as well. I'm not, again, I would need to get a little more detail about the specifics of what you're referring to, but I didn't turn anything down.
Councillor Sharwal.
Through Mayor, thank you. Did we not have, wasn't there a grant given to us for this at all? Or I'm just going off of memory. I thought there was some kind of a grant. I don't have an opinion on this either way, but was there a grant given towards this?
So through the mayor, for this specific one, this would be future, so there isn't a grant commitment. There has been grants and different fundings that sometimes come along through these things, or partnerships or sponsorships. There's many different ways that we could tackle it. Rarely is it 100% of a donation. In some scenarios it could be, but usually there's more of a matching type of scenario.
Councilor Vardy.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I'd be open to deferring this so that we could follow up and look at grants and look at possible gifts, before we commit to $90,000 of capital at this time.
Yeah, we can certainly carry or vote on changing this to deferral.
To when?
When would you like it deferred to?
I think I'd like to defer it for 6 months. That would give us plenty of time to pursue grants and pursue other possibilities. And I do take your point that even if we got something free, we'd have to pay for installation. So you're looking at, I don't know, $10,000. So it's not going to be cheap. So if we could defer it for 6 months for consideration in 6 months'
I
time.
think deferring it for 6 months, it would still have to be budgeted for.
Okay, then I would say take it out.
All right, so we'll just leave it as removed. All right, I'll read the resolution. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that $90,000 in reserves for public art be removed. E-scribe, please. Yeah, the voting hasn't finished, so you're in time. Sorry about that, I didn't see it.
No, it's okay. Through you, Mayor. So because it's from reserves and it doesn't have an impact on the levy, could staff, if a project came forward throughout the year, just bring that project forward? I'm just trying to understand why it needs to be in the budget if we are not aware of something coming forward, unless we know for sure that there's something that was planned for this year. Couldn't staff just bring it forward kind of à la carte if the project was coming forward in 2025?
Sarah, did you want to answer that question, please? Oh, Tony, whoever's best at answering it. I'm happy to hear.
Through the mayor, so I think you're asking if we remove it from the budget now, but then something comes forward that we need the money in year, we come with a budget amendment? Is that what you're asking? Yes, that's always possible, yes.
Councillor Frey.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have another question. In Grimsby on the Lake, there was money taken for public art at the corner of Winston Road and that corner, the corner in front of the charcuterie establishment. We took cash as for art there. Is this that, or is that a separate project? Okay, Sarah, Ms. Sweeney is nodding no. So I just want to make sure it's not money that we've taken in reserves for a specific project. Okay, thanks. That answers my question.
All right, the resolution's on the floor. Vote by e-scribe. Councillor Frey, say yes.
Just waiting for Bradsey, who's not paying us. Councillor Bradsey? We'll amend the capital.
That's carried, so the capital budget will be amended. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 7 being the 2025 water gross operating budget on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor Corstangi, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Discussion. Seeing none. Where is it? All right. Moved by Councillor Corstangi, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Resolved that the 2025 water gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $8,413,260 and the water rates outlined in Appendix B be approved. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, that's carried unanimously. Up next, can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 8 being the 2025 Grimsby Downtown Business Improvement Area gross operating budget on the floor for discussion? Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Howe. Councillor Vardy, go ahead.
Thank you. And, you know, maybe Councillor DeVoli can answer this, or you, Mayor. It looks like we're levying $87,350, but when I looked at the budget, I thought that was their planned deficit. Did I read that wrong? Did I get that wrong? Or is that just the amount that's requested for this year? And then there's another deficit after that, maybe. Oh, okay, well, Tony.
Yeah, Tony, I believe it's the same as last year.
Yeah, through the mayor, yes, it is the same as last year. It hasn't increased. It's the same amount that's being levied for in 2025 as it was in 2024.
But when they submitted their budget, were they over budget? Did they have a shortfall? I just want to make sure that we're not on the hook for the shortfall.
So and their budget is different in that it has increased revenues this year from grants they're expecting to receive and offsetting increased expenses related to those grants. So my understanding is the expenses would be related to the revenues. If the revenues are received, the expenses would move forward. If not received, then those expenses would not move forward.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we don't have to cover them.
Seeing no further questions, moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Howe, resolved that the 2025 Grimsby Downtown Business Improvement Area gross operating budget outlined in Appendix A in the amount of $347,870 and a net levy of $87,350 be approved. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Up next, can I get a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 9 being the 2025 operating levy on the floor for discussion? Councillor Vardy, Councillor Corstangi. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Vardy.
I'd like to add to the operating budget. I really do think that we need to start work on revenue generation, particularly in the communities area. And while I know that there are some pieces being done, because I've spoken with Sarah about this before, but I do think that we're prudent to start now and not wait to be looking, and I'm not talking about user fees here. I'm looking at how can we better use our facilities, attract more people to using them. I think specifically, well, in one area, Southward Park, also Fire Station 2. You know, I'd like to see how we can generate revenue other than just taxation. So I would like to add some money to begin that work. Maybe the CAO could ballpark it, throw an amount in there, but I think that would be important to do. Thank you.
All right, we just need a seconder for this resolution. Councillor Bradzi. Councillor Sharwa.
Through your mayor, thank you. Just clarification, I'm all for revenue generation, but what is that? Are we investing in another person to generate this revenue? Like, I want to make sure we're actually earning something.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can explain. No, I'm thinking more about, and we can do it with the staff that we have, how can we, say, attract maybe festivals to Southward Park? And that would be a revenue-generating activity. How can we just do more with what we've got to generate revenue? And I don't think we need more staff to do it. I'm not talking about a staff person, but to look at all the assets that we have. For instance, Fire Station 2 is completely underutilized. It was supposed to be a training center, and then we trained everybody, and there's no one left to be trained, and other people opened training centers, and there's nothing, nobody left to train that wants to use our training center. That has got a commercial kitchen in there. We could be, in off times holding, cooking classes in there. Like, there's all, it's a way to look at what assets do we have, and what are the ideas that we can have to bring more revenue into the town.
Councillor Sharwa.
Thank you, through Mayor Jordan. For the training center, I would suggest rather than adding more staff, if we're just hiring a facilities permit person right now. So possibly if we could just have that person take that on, that's.
I wasn't suggesting at all hiring more staff. Maybe we need a consultant to help us. I think that might be prudent. That can take an overall look at what we do. Maybe it's a small amount. Maybe it's $25,000 to do an initial kind of look at things, but I think we're really missing a lot of opportunity.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do currently have a community service facility utilization strategy underway. So if maybe we can take this back and maybe staff can report back rather than deciding today, because we really can't ballpark an amount either, and there's some other moving parts. I think it'd be better to kind of report back through a staff report.
Okay.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I think I do concur with what Councillor is saying, because I think that there's a lot of opportunities in revenue optimization, if you might put it that way. I think what we're looking for is probably a task force across maybe several departments. There's all types of areas where we could probably increase revenue. Fees is one of them. But I mean, I'm not going to go through a long list of them here, but certainly there's probably opportunities. What we're trying to do, what we should be trying to do is minimize the amount of taxes that we collect from the residents, and maximize taxes or revenues from every other area we possibly can, because we know that the taxes to the residents are going up all the time. And Tony touched on one thing there earlier in his presentation, that we should be putting more of a focus on economic development, for example. The more commercial industrial taxes we get, the least we have to rely on the residents. I mean, there's another area right there for revenue generation. So I think we need to look at this at a broader scale, not just user fees. Sponsorships is another one, and we know that works because we've proven it this year. So I think we need to look across the whole gauntlet, across all the departments, and look at various areas where we can maximize or optimize any type of revenue generation. And we're not going to have the answer here tonight, but I think it's worthy of taking a few staff and a task force and maybe kick it off and see where it goes. That's my suggestion.
Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you, through Chair. I absolutely agree with that. I think we're in the middle of the community services consultation, but we had one with Public Works, and they specifically addressed the Fire Station 2 and generating more revenue and ways that we could do that and why we weren't getting it. So I think having more of a collective information and then making a plan going forward would be a good idea.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, I agree with all of this. Extra revenue generation is great. I just don't see how this is a budgetary item for this year. It might be a direction to staff that we want to bring forward at the next council meeting, which I'll second or I'll vote in favor of for sure. But if it's not something that we're going to budget for, then I don't think we should be discussing it right now. Actually, it's not related to unless there's a specific amount or something that people want to put in the budget, it's not relevant to what we're talking about right now.
Yeah, it's turned into a direction, but I don't think there's any harm in getting it started right away. It's certainly procedurally, if council's happy I'll read it here, resolve that the staff report back on a strategic plan for revenue generation and community services. There's no harm.
I would limit it to community services. I would just.
Sure.
I think we should go beyond
Back with a report on revenue generation.
Okay.
All right. I think we can do it right now.
Sorry, can I suggest, hello?
Go ahead, Councillor Frank.
I don't think we should be so specific. You said, I think you're going to read it out that we were going to concentrate particularly on community services.
That's been eliminated.
Okay, so I think we should just look at the broader picture.
Yep, that's the resolution reflects that now. I'll read it. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Bradzi. Resolved that staff report back on a strategic plan for revenue generation. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frank?
Yes?
Thank you. That's carried.
Any discussion under operating still?
Can I have a mover and seconder to get?
We're still under operating,
Oh, wait.
so more discussion.
Any more discussion on operating? Councillor Sharwell?
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. So I had forwarded my motion to the clerk regarding the deletion of the customer service strategy. It was for $95,000. Originally, I actually wanted to take out the branding strategy as well. It was for 100-something thousand, but I recognize the fact that we do need a new logo for the Peach King Center. So although I would have liked this to have been deferred, I recognize that it's probably the time. But the customer service strategy, I don't know that this is the year that we need to do it and that it's necessary. So given the hard times, I'd like to take that out.
So this actually doesn't impact the operating levy?
Correct, but I'd still like to take it out.
All right. Any further discussion? Yeah. Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor Jordan, I'm just curious if the customer service strategy has the focus of better serving the residents through digital means.
Through the mayor, thanks for the question. So the customer service strategy will look at everything from what our demographic of our community is now and projecting that forward. So what is our community looking for? Is it digital services? Is it in person? Is it more remote facilities, like having different stations around town to administer customer service? It would look for efficiencies and processes among all of our customer service delivery, and then also look at things like our like our communication methods, such as the website or digital signs, how we can leverage those. It would be a holistic view of corporate service as the corporation, and then from there, sort of individual, once the strategy is approved at a high level, individual requests and how we would want to sparse that out over a couple of years or many years would be from the, is what would come from the strategy.
Thank you. I've definitely heard from a lot of residents who would like to interact better with us via through our website or digital means. I got to say, I would shy away from additional in-person or brick and mortar locations, but yeah, I definitely would want to see us do that. Maybe even like a 24/7. If we were to build out an AI response tool for our website, could be something that could serve us well. If we look into that, then this is something I can support.
Councillor Howe.
Customer service, to me, is any business that you've got. Customer service should be number one. Should be number one. That's what the customer remembers. That's when the first point of action or reaction with whatever the heck you're selling. In our case, services. And there's only one opportunity to make that first impression, and that's the first time. Our customer service is not just one person behind the counter here. It's a whole bunch of people. It's customer service it should be corporate-wide. Customer service is something that nobody can take for granted. And with all due respect, Councillor Radzi, I don't look at the digital world or that bull. But I get, Fred, you talked about A1. I know exactly what it is. I've seen it work. Thank you. But no, we don't need that. That's hiding, not customer service. And it's not just here in this building. It's everybody that's got the name Town of Grimsby on them is a customer service. And everybody has to be part of it. The library, they got food. And I suspect that there's going to be something in there is how do you handle the customer that is not very pleasant? And that better be there. And I don't know about you, some of you, we were over at the Roma conference there on the weekend. And one of the classes that our seminars, whatever you want to call it, that I sat in, dealt with that, how to deal with the customer. And it's very real. So don't go cheap on trying to put the best face forward. So I certainly would not accept or approve dropping that one at all. We can drop, council conference expenses, for instance. We can drop that, but, not customer service, too important.
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Yeah, I don't know if I can add much to what Councillor Howe said, but he's right. I mean, in every possible way, every single person that we employ, every single person on staff, every single councillor, every single consultant that we have should all have customer service at the front end. Without our customer service, we have nothing. They're the ones that pay our bills. Our customers are our shareholders, and they are taxpayers. So let's not reduce anything to enhance that. We must do everything we possibly can to enhance that. And I'm sure that Sarah probably has some type of a program in place where she's teaching all of the staff across all of the disciplines to look at everything they do as part of a customer service. And you cannot spend enough money on customer service. And I know that coming from a customer service industry myself, that's really, really important. Spare no money on it. Thank you.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, I think we're getting a little off topic here. So the suggestion here is not to not provide customer service. We already do that. It's just a matter of, we already do this well as when we're communicating. So we have a communications person that's letting the public know about, new things that or taxes or whatever we need to communicate to the public. And then going through the queue as far as if there's an issue, if there's a light that's out on their street, we just need to have that constant form of communication. And this is where the directors of each department come in, and they can, deal with this on their own. I don't think we need to add $95,000 to the budget for this when we have highly competent professionals that can do this and can manage this through their own staff. And with the taxpayers in mind, I think our taxpayers would like to see that we don't need to spend another $95,000 in order to provide good service. Thank you.
Councillor Korstanji.
Thank you. I just have a question about this. Is this a study on customer service, or is this actually implementing customer service improvements?
Tori.
Yeah, through the mayor, it would be both. Our hope would be, it would be a study to evaluate current state, do a bit of a SWOT analysis, allow a consultant to look at what recommendations they would make in terms of best practices, similar municipalities doing a bit of a sector scan. And then the hope would be that walking away from that, we have an implementation plan at the end of that strategy. So the hope would be to present both at whether similar times or sort of a phase 1, phase 2 within that sort of year and a half scope that we're looking at.
Okay, so would the implementation then be more than what is budgeted here, or we won't know that until after?
Through the chair, I would anticipate the implementation to be more than what that is, but any low-hanging fruit, anything that we can implement without having a budgetary impact, we would certainly be able to do that, and then any additional budget requests would come back to the budget.
All right, just to add a little bit, given the fact that every forward-thinking corporation, Canada and North America wide, has customer service strategies as a very important aspect of their business, especially today in 2025. We have 30,000 customers, and I think having a united strategy across the municipality is something we certainly need to look at, and we certainly need to put money into this to make Grimsby a better place for everyone. So that's where I stand. So you can vote on. Moved by Councillor Charwa, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that project. Yeah, they just moved by Councillor Charwa, second by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that the project 10006 customer service strategy with a budget of $98,500 be removed from the budget. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake?
No.
Thank you. And that's defeated. Councillor Bradzi.
Yes, Mayor, through you. I just wanted to also bring up, while we're on operating, the branding strategy. I'm not suggesting that remove it. I'm also actually saying that we should support the additional 15 to bring that to 60,000. But I think those dollars would go much further if, instead of hiring a consultant to conduct a branding strategy for us, that we strike up a steering committee and maybe put that out to local challenges. I'm sure we have digital artists in the community that would love the exposure should their logo be suggested, or we have friendly competitions for many of the items that would come into a branding strategy. And to be honest, I don't think we need to hire a consultant from Hamilton or Toronto to brand Grimsby. I think that can come from within, and I think we have the people to do it. I'd offer to chair the committee if it's a burden.
I think what we do is we approve the dollars, and then we come back. Staff will come back with a alternative strategy. I think
You can
that
put that into a motion if you
I don't know if, yeah.
if you want to put that into a motion.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to actually change the word. The only thing I'm changing is that would be hiring a consultant. So I guess there isn't a budget change?
No,
So
there wouldn't be a budget change. That could be certainly a direction to staff.
Yeah, however you
to
think
look
to
at the
proceed.
best way to proceed.
Yep.
Councillor Howe.
I would hope that, by not using a consultant, that this is not going to become, one of the preschool little coloring contests or, what does daddy look like? It's too important. I've seen too many mess ups with what they think is a good logo. Let's take a look at sports teams. How many good ones are there? Not a whole lot. But you can't do it wrong. You only got one chance at this. Otherwise, people are just going to laugh at you. So it's got to be done right.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. So this one, actually, I spoke with Christina about, because I was actually wanting to remove this from the budget. She gave me a very, great description about what this entails. And this is where we're getting community input. We're getting a lot of input from the community as to, what people think of when they think about Grimsby. So there's a much more holistic thing rather than just the logo. So I just want to make sure that we're doing this properly and it's not just one person coming up with a logo. There's more to the branding strategy. So I don't know if Christina can potentially come and brief everybody on this later, but I thought her explanation was very thorough.
I also had similar conversations with Christina. I didn't mean to just say that it was simply a logo. I just used the logo as an example that we could facilitate responses from the community, maybe like graphic artists. I just think there's a lot of resources that we can pull from within Grimsby that can complete a very thorough study. And I think our taxpayer dollars and the $60,000 budgeted to this would go much further than if we hired a consultant to do them.
All right, so here's your resolution, and let me know if you like it. Resolve that the budget be approved for the branding project and that staff report back with the methodology, specifically not hiring a consultant. All right. All right. Councillor Vardy.
Yeah, so are we approving the money but not having it done outside? Is that what we're voting on? Because I think we should either vote for the money, yes, no, vote for the project, yes, no, and kind of go from there. We can ask staff to come back to us with a report, but the way it's written now, it's like we're approving the money, but they can't go out, but that's what the project is, so.
So what you would do if you're not happy with this resolution, you vote no, it gets defeated, and then it just goes back to the original.
Which is?
To include $15,000 in the budget.
That we pass, okay, all right.
I'll read the resolution again. Moved by Councillor Bradzi, second by Councillor DeFlavio. Resolved that the budget be approved for the branding project and that staff report back with the methodology, specifically not hiring a consultant. So vote e-scribe, please.
I can't see that up there.
Resolved that the budget be approved for the branding project and that staff report back with the methodology, specifically not hiring a consultant. Councillor Frake.
No.
Thank you. All right, that was defeated.
Is there anything else out there?
May I speak to it first?
Yeah. We have another resolution.
She wants to speak to it first.
Yeah, so I'll read the resolution and then Councillor DeVoldy can speak to it. Moved by Councillor DeVoldy, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that council directs staff to find budget opportunities to reduce the tax levy for 2025 by $100,000. Councillor DeVoldy?
Thank you. I think what we're all hearing around the horseshoe this evening is that we want to find ways to keep property taxes as low as we possibly can. And you can tell by the discussion that, we're looking at each and every project and talking about them and trying to figure out how we can do that. I I guess the really hard part is that our staff know their budget best. They know what's in it by department. And in fact, I'll say our finance director and his staff probably know it the best. And so I would still like us to sharpen our pencil just a little bit harder. And that's why I have the resolution on the table that we ask staff to find a way within the budget to reduce the tax levy for 2025 by 100,000. I did have some initial discussions with Mr. Delmonico. I don't know if it's something he's prepared to talk about tonight or if it's just something that he wants to give some further thought to, but I'll just leave that out there.
Councillor Howe.
Through you, Chair. Just back that, because taking an approach from a positive, we've done a lot of retrofitting and upgrading of lighting, of heating. But yet, as I went through the budgets, it looked like we're not picking up the savings over on the budget side compared to what the actuals were. I think that there's significant room there just on the utilities. And that's not a negative to anybody. It's the reality. If we can acknowledge what we've done well and done correctly and get a little savings off of that. So that's the one thought that I've got on it. And certainly staff, if there are any other items like that where, you know, just line by line by line by line by line, you got to do it. But anyway.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. So I agree with the general sentiment of Councillor DeVoe. He's looking for savings. $100,000, I guess my question would be, what would that mean as a percentage to Mr. Delmonico? So if we could start with that, and then I can follow up.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a 100,000 reduction would bring the levy down from 6.44 to 5.88.
Thank you, Mayor. So thank you for that, Mr. Delmonico. My concern is that that's not enough. Whatever metric you want to use to determine a reasonable tax increase, 6.44% is not it. So, you know, whether you look at the current projections for cost of living for 2025 at 2.7%, or the inflation rate for 2025, projected inflation rate at about 2%. To put it into context for you, using the rule of 72 for compounding, at 6.44%, our current rate of tax increase, that means taxes would double every 11.4 years. At the current rate of cost of living at 2.7%, if that's what people, and not everybody's getting a 2.7% wage increase, but let's say they do, their wages would double every 26 years. Our tax rate needs to in some way reflect what's actually happening outside of these council chambers and outside of this building. And I don't think that that number does that. I think aligning spending increases with cost of living ensures tax increases are reasonable and reflect residents' ability to pay. And these kinds of sudden and significant hikes, that are beyond inflation, erode affordability in the community. So I guess the bottom line is I think government needs to be responsive to the discomfort that's being felt by the taxpayers outside of these chambers. And budgets that look at an increase of 6.4% as reasonable kind of breed feelings of resentment I think, in the community. The regional budget, which is at like 10%, goes way beyond the feelings of resentment that I'm getting from members of the community. So I think the bottom line is, if we do approve this budget, which I'm going to vote against, whatever happens, we need to do a better job of explaining why. And I don't think that we're doing an adequate job of explaining why. I think you did a pretty good job tonight, Mr. Delmonico, but I don't think that the average taxpayer is tuning in tonight to watch this. And so what they see is just the increase on the tax bill. So with the tax bill, some of what you said tonight has to, in language that people can understand, needs to be included. I still don't think that that's adequate, and that's why I'm going to be voting against it. But I really think that in the future, any increases that we make as a council really need to reflect what's happening outside of council. And whatever metric that is, it needs to be somewhat in line with what's actually happening economically within the country. And this is not that. This is more than double that. So I agree with Councillor Davoli, but I would prefer for us to look at 3% as an increase and try to whittle it down to that, or 2.7% as an increase, which is the cost of living over the year, and try to whittle it down to that. I'm not satisfied with a $100,000 reduction, so I will be voting against this budget as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeFlavio. Just before I take the next speaker, I think to look at our future, you have to look at our past. And you're 15 years on council. You had several years where there was 0% budget. One year that there was a minus 4.97% on the budget. And quite honestly, we as a council in 2025 are paying for those 0% increases in 2025 dollars. We've, for several years, council thought, let's give a 0% budget. Let's not do, let's say, IT enhancements at Town Hall. Right now, we're actually the only municipality in Niagara that's able to get cybersecurity insurance because we've put money into our IT department. In 2018, the town was working on Windows 2007. We needed to put money in, and we shouldn't have done 0% increases or a 4.97 decrease back in those days, because we're paying for it now with our asset replacement plan. We're paying for it now in larger increases now in 2025 dollars. So, Councillor Davoli, go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm going to use some numbers here as to how I kind of think about our budget. We started at 6.44. The $100,000 coming out will cut that by 0.6, so we're down to 5.88. We have a 1% infrastructure levy, which is 1% of the 5.88, and then we're only at a 1% infrastructure levy. I personally would like to see that even greater, but I will vote for 1% and have a start there. So that already accounts for 4.88. Inflation, we worked into this budget at, I think, 1.1%. But realistically, it's running about 2.5%. That's what the Financial Planners Council of Canada is using in all the forecasts across the country. So at the end of that, we come down to something like 2.3, 2.5%, which happens to be what we've given our employees under our contract negotiations, and that doesn't even account for the impact on benefits and so on. And so at the end of the day, life is just tight. You know, I will say if my fellow councillors don't want to reduce it by 100,000, or if you'd like to even reduce the operating budget by 100,000, but increase the transfer to reserves and to the capital infrastructure levy, I'm equally happy with that option. But at the end of the day, the proposal was just to ask our staff to sharpen their pencils just a wee bit more. But where our biggest gap is really in how much we're setting aside for reserves. And I do agree with the mayor that, you know, it's time. We have now reached that wall where if we're going to have municipal taxes going forward that our sons and our daughters and our grandchildren are going to be paying for, then we need to start paying for it now, not, you know, kind of kicking it down the road and reducing reserves and things like that. So I was a bit torn, even as I was drafting this. You know, on the one hand, you know, interested in always sharpening our pencils a little bit, but also knowing, you know, sitting on finance and having that background, that infrastructure gap is huge. It's just huge. And those are just my thoughts on it.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Councillor Foley, I got to say, I definitely want to support I guess the direction to ask staff to look for at least 100 grand in savings. We've kind of put forward a couple things tonight that obviously have or haven't gone through. So just kind of thinking if the answer is to have staff propose us ideas, would it not make sense to defer the entire budget until those propositions come forward?
Tony, do you want to speak on that, the implications of deferring the budget and going backwards?
Yeah, through the mayor, I think if that's the will of council, we could take the motion to find the 100,000 in savings and still proceed with an approved budget tonight.
Thank you. Go ahead, Tori.
Through the chair, the way this motion was worded is that staff would come back and we'd put a memo on our agenda for February 10th with where the cuts were found, and it would be in our bylaws as well. So that's the intention behind the wording of that, if we were to approve it as written, as opposed to deferring it.
Councillor Sharwa.
Through Mayor Jordan, I appreciate that you're trying to save money, but I thought that was the whole point of why we were having this meeting today. Like I've proposed a few areas where we could cut. We said no to that. So I feel like if staff comes back, then we're going to be debating all of these different areas that are, you know, we all have priority areas. So I don't know that this is ever going to end if we continue this in another meeting.
No, this is minor operating costs, savings across the board, so it's not something that is going to come as a motion for specific things. I think finance staff feels that they have the ability to find the $100,000 and get in at 5.88%.
So, sorry, Tony. So is this safe to say you'd kind of be trimming like throughout? So it's not like the one major item or anything like that?
Through the mayor, yes, that would be our intention, to not remove any one big thing, but just, like you said, trim here and there.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. Can I also just add that there's no reason to stop at 100,000. Keep on going. I just wanted to also pick up on what Councillor DeFlavio stated, and definitely what I've been hearing from the public is that they really want us to be mindful of taxpayer dollars and really want us to be looking for any efficiencies and savings we can, especially with the cost of living and cost of everything as they are right now. So I think we should aggressively pursue more savings anywhere we can and make it not just a budget mantra, but a mantra of every day of the year. Thanks.
All right, seeing no further Councillor Howe.
I'm going to say something, and I'm going to agree with Councillor Flavio. Did I? Flavio. Yeah. Oh, did I say that? You touched on something about people asking. Again, I'll go back to the Roma. In the first seminar I sat in, a guy by the name of Tony had yada, yada. But that's what he said is we've got to talk. We've got to explain and clearly and concisely, you know, and you're better off to do it wherever you can in person, because these things right here can mess up everything. But you have to be prepared, and it's going to get even tighter. And a bigger story is most people are not going to understand asset management planning. Asset management planning, and that's, you know, we've just touched it. What, 178,000 into reserve, Director, I believe, yeah, this year. That's just a touch. And what's our spread? We got to make up about 11 million, 5 million. Okay, so that's coming down the pipe, and we're going to have to live it, because if we want to, the statement earlier was, you know, our kids, and I got kids. I don't have any grandchildren, though. So, but them, you know, it's the next generation that we can't leave having to pay for everything that we've got to enjoy. And that's really comes down. We've had a great life, but we're probably going to be paying the piper a little bit, going down. But talk to them, explain. And if you don't have the right answer, let's get the right answer, because I certainly don't have all the right answers to tell people. So,
Councillor Frake.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I certainly endorse what Councillor Devoli is doing, and I like the idea of not cutting any one thing, or one big thing, or two big things. I think we send it back. I have every trust in the world for our staff. I mean, they've been very responsible. I looked through the budget. I think they've been very diligent, and I think they've sharpened their pencil. At the same time, I do not want to be telling them how many pencils to buy. I don't want to micromanage staff on this budget. I trust them. However, if they can get another $100,000, great. But let's be very cautious, because if we start cutting costs out of certain areas, then we're going to have potentially another problem, and that is service levels. So then all of a sudden we get people coming to town hall with pickets because we're not servicing the town properly. So let's be very, very careful where we cut, if we can cut any more costs, because it will affect service levels at some point in time. One equals the other. It's as simple as that. So let's be very, very careful. And if you can get $100,000 more of the budget, great, fantastic. But please, let's not do that at the expense of service levels. Thank you.
All right, moved by Councillor Devoli, second by Councillor Howe. Resolved that this council directs staff to find budget opportunities to reduce the tax levy for 2025 by $100,000. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried. Moved by Councillor Vardy, second by Councillor Corstangi. Resolved that the 2025 operating levy outlined in Appendix A with operating expenditures of $32,993,140 and a net levy of $19,085,510 be approved as amended. E-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried 8-1. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 10, being the Vision Zero reserve, on the floor for discussions? Councillor Corstangi. Councillor Charwa. Moved by Councillor Corstangi, second by Councillor Charwa. Resolved that new Vision Zero reserve be established and the reserve and reserve funds bylaw number 2185 be amended to reflect the change. Question? Discussion? Yes.
Thank you.
I just wanted to read it first.
Okay, thank you, sorry. Yeah, so I recognize that this was voted on by a previous council, so we had no idea how the community was going to react to this. And I think we've all had our share of, complaints from our residents that, this is a cash grab and whatever. So we spend a lot of money allocated to police services. So for me, I've, heard from the community that they really dislike Vision Zero. And I would personally like to ask for our police force to start with speed traps, and rather than install these cameras, which we've heard the community majority say that they did not like, and maybe this is how we start to use our police services that we've paid so much into, and we just cut out Vision Zero. That's my recommendation.
This isn't anything to do with cutting out Vision Zero. This is just establishing a reserve for the monies that come back to us as a municipality for participating at the region's Vision Zero project.
Tony, can you expand on that, what we're approving here? I was under assumption this was different, so.
Yeah, this is just the approval to establish the reserve. This was an initiative that was started a few years ago, and we did not receive any funds from this because the region was recouping some capital costs to get the program up and running. This relates to the red light cameras, the speed enforcement cameras on regional roads. And so some of that revenue comes back to the local area municipalities. We're just establishing a reserve so that the revenue we get for that goes for that reserve. And the requirement is that these funds have to be spent on traffic safety initiatives. So by putting it in the reserve, we'll be able to utilize it from that reserve when needed.
So if we vote no to this, what happens?
Well, we wouldn't be establishing a reserve, and where would the funds go? Yeah, that must be treated like a deferred revenue.
Just to clarify, Councillor Charwa, voting no to it just means that we have no place to receive the funds that we're getting from the region.
So this doesn't impact any more.
This is the receiving of funds. It's a positive thing.
I appreciate that. I was under the assumption this somehow changed the agreement moving
No, if I could
forward.
just add, yeah, every reserve needs to be approved by council, like the establishing of a reserve, just like using funds from a reserve needs to be approved by council. So this is just to approve the establishment of that
Okay,
reserve.
I appreciate that. Like I said, I was under the assumption this somehow changed the agreement, so I appreciate you answering that. Thank you.
I think we should just vote on this. I'm going to call the question. No, I'm just going to call the question. Moved by Councillor Korstanji, second by Councillor Charwa. Resolved that a new Vision Zero reserve established in the Reserve and Reserve Funds bylaw number 21-85 be amended to reflect this change. E-scribe, please. Oh, Councillor Frake.
Councillor Radzi.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried. Can I have a mover and seconder to get recommendation number 11 being the direction to prepare the 2025 budget bylaws and bylaw amendments on the floor for discussion? Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Howe, Councillor Davoli. Councillor Vardy. All right, seeing no speakers, moved by Councillor Howe, second by Councillor Davoli, resolved that staff be directed to prepare the necessary 2025 budget, water rate, wastewater rate, bylaws, and amendments to the Reserve and Reserve Funds, bylaw number 21-85 as required, for approval at the February 10th, 2025 council meeting. Vote on e-scribe, please. Councillor Frake.
Yes.
Thank you. And that's carried unanimously. Thank you, council, and thank you very much, staff, for doing a great job. Really proud that this budget's going to come in with Tony's help at 5.88. I think given the economic circumstances right now, everyone can be commended for doing a fantastic job to make Grimsby the best community in Ontario. Next council meeting will be held February 10th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. Good evening, everyone. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.